The first leaf from the sycamore deep in the alley had just begun to fall when I snatched Helen's white shirt from the clothesline and threw it on the ground. The shirt, still warm and smelling of clean linen from the sun, picked up several gray streaks from the dusty concrete, like the faint, placid smile she always wore. The one that drove me crazy. "Leah!" My dad's roar echoed from the kitchen, followed by the clang of a spatula against the side of a pan. "What the hell is your problem now?" I didn't turn around. I ground my heel into the shirt, the sole of my canvas sneaker catching on a loose thread. "What was she doing with my grandma's wash basin?" I yelled back, my voice ricocheting off the opposite brick wall and shattering into sharp, angry pieces. "That was Grandma's. She has no right to use it." Helen appeared at the top of the stairs. The cuffs of her light blue loungewear rolled up to her forearms, revealing the pale, bluish veins at her wrists. She saw the shirt on the ground and hesitated for a moment, saying nothing as she started down to pick it up. The second her fingers touched the fabric, I sidestepped, deliberately kicking the toe of my sneaker against the bones on the back of her hand. Hiss! The sound she made, a sharp intake of breath, was so quiet it was as if she were afraid of disturbing someone. "Go on, pick it up. Why'd you stop?" I crossed my arms, staring her down. "Isn't this what you love to do? Playing the perfect little homemaker? Dad goes to work, you do the laundry and cook. I get home from school, you're serving me snacks. You really think you're the lady of the house now?" She slowly pulled her hand back. In the sunlight, her fingertips were an unnatural shade of red. There was a pale brown scar on the second knuckle of her left ring finger, from where she'd cut herself chopping vegetables last month. I remember she'd stood in front of me, holding up her bleeding hand and asking if we had any Band-Aids. I was painting my nails, and I didn't even look up from the bottle of polish. "I already washed the basin out," she said, her knees making a soft popping sound as she stood. Her voice was mild, like water that had been boiled and left to cool. "I thought you wouldn't mind." "You thought?" My voice shot up. I grabbed the half-dead pot hose plant by the wall and slammed it onto the ground. Amid the sharp crack of the ceramic pot breaking, my dad burst out of the kitchen, spatula in hand. His faded blue work shirt splattered with grease. "That's enough." His hand flew up, but it froze mid-air when he saw the look in my eyes. He ended up slapping his own thigh, hard. "Helen is family. Leah, you don't talk to her like that." "I never said she was my family." I shot back, my chin jutting out. Tears welled up unexpectedly. Not from fear, but from the memory of my grandma squeezing my hand before she died, whispering, "Leah, you be good." And now this woman was standing in the place that should have been hers. Grandma was my only family. She's only been gone a year, and you couldn't wait to bring this woman into our house. What were you thinking? Helen spoke then, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. "Leah, your father and I only got together 6 months after your grandmother passed." "Shut up." I grabbed the enamel mug from the table and hurled it at her. It grazed her shoulder, hit the doorframe, and bounced back, shattering into pieces near her feet. Brown tea stains splattered the cuff of her light blue pants like an ugly patch. "Who gave you the right to say my name? You think you're worthy?" My dad was shaking with fury. He pointed at the door and yelled, "Get out, and don't you come back until you've sorted yourself out." I grabbed my backpack from the couch and slammed the door behind me. The impact was hard enough to make the calendar on the wall sway. When I got to the end of the alley, I glanced back. Helen was kneeling, picking up the broken pieces of the mug. My dad stood behind her, smoking, the rings of smoke carrying his size up into the gray sky. Her silhouette was so thin, the light blue fabric clinging to the sharp angles of her shoulder blades, making her look like a leaf that could be blown away by the slightest breeze. Unbelievable. I stormed into the corner store. Maria, the owner, was turning sunflower seeds in a hot wok with a pair of tongs. She saw me and just shook her head. "Fighting with your stepmom again? Kid, you've got the same temper your grandma had when she was young. A real short fuse." "Don't call her my stepmom," I said, ripping open a bag of sour plums and popping one in my mouth. The sourness made my teeth ache. "She's a stranger." Maria clucked her tongue, the tongs clanging against the wok. "But she's good to you. Remember when you had that fever? She ran to 3 different pharmacies in the middle of the night to find you medicine. Came back with her pant legs covered in mud, her knee all scraped up. She was faking it." I spit the plum pit onto the floor. It bounced and hit a bottle of soy sauce on the shelf. "She's just trying to suck up to my dad, trying to take my grandma's place and be the queen of the castle." Maria didn't say anything else. The toasted smell of the sunflower seeds mixed with the scent of charcoal grills from the alley, and a sudden tightness constricted my chest. It was an autumn just like this when Grandma died. The wail of the ambulance siren had thrown the whole alley into chaos. I held her frail, withered hand, watching the light in her eyes fade, until finally, I heard the doctor say, "It's time to prepare." Back then, my dad had been slumped over on a bench in the hospital hallway. His back bent like a rain-soaked shrimp, but now, he could smile while taking a bowl and chopsticks from Helen's hands. It was disgusting. It was getting dark when I got home. Helen was setting the table. Steam rose from the white porcelain bowls filled with my favorite, macaroni and cheese. When she saw me, she wiped her hands on her apron. Her voice even softer than usual. "It's still hot. Do you want some?" Like I'd eat anything you made. I threw my backpack on the couch, deliberately knocking over the small stool next to the table. As it clattered against the concrete floor, I saw her hand, which had been resting on the edge of the table, jerk back, her knuckles white. My dad came out of the back room holding a folded sweater. "It's getting colder tomorrow. Wear this." The sweater was dark gray, with a soft, light blue thread stitched around the collar. Helen had stayed up late knitting it last week. I remembered getting up in the middle of the night and seeing the light on in her room. Through the crack in the door, I saw her silhouette, her head bent as she threaded the yarn, the bamboo needles occasionally clicking together. "I don't want it." I took a step back as if the sweater would burn me. Who knows if she spit in it while she was knitting? "Leah." Dad slammed the sweater on the table, making the soup in the bowl slosh over the side. "Can't you be reasonable for 1 second? Reasonable is her not being in our house." I snatched the sweater and threw it out the door. It sailed through the air in a gray arc and landed in the trash can at the end of the alley. "Nobody is ever going to take my grandma's place." Helen's voice, quieter than usual, suddenly cut through the tension, as if filtered through water. "The sweater. I made it with the yarn your grandmother left behind. She always used to say that dark gray looked beautiful with light blue." "You dare bring up my grandma." I lunged forward, intending to sweep the bowl of mac and cheese off the table, but she grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cool, the skin of her palm calloused, probably from all the housework she did, but her grip was surprisingly strong. I struggled for a moment but couldn't break free. Rage shot up through me like a weed, and I kicked her hard in the shin. "Let go of me. You thief. You steal our things, you steal my dad's attention, and now you want to steal my grandma's place." She stumbled from the force of the kick, but she didn't let go. Her eyes just slowly turned red. "Leah," she said, looking right at me, her eyelashes glistening as if wet. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just want—" "You want to be my stepmom? You want me to call you Mom? Dream on." I finally wrenched my hand free, a red scratch appearing on my skin from somewhere. "My grandma is watching from heaven, and she will not let you get away with this." Suddenly, my dad slapped himself across the face. The sound exploded in the small living room. "Enough!" he roared, his eyes bloodshot as he looked at me. "What did your grandmother tell you before she died? She told you to get along with Helen. Have you forgotten everything?" "I haven't forgotten." The tears finally fell, hitting my faded jeans and soaking into the denim in small, dark spots. "Grandma told me to watch out for snakes in the grass. She said some people look harmless, but they're full of poison." The color drained from Helen's face. Her lips moved, but no words came out. She turned and walked into the kitchen. I heard the faucet run for a long time, followed by the soft clinking of dishes. She was probably doing the washing up. My dad squatted on the floor, smoking. The ember of his cigarette glowed and faded in the dim light like a watchful eye. I didn't eat dinner that night. I hid in my room, gnawing on a dry piece of bread. Late that night, I heard a noise from the living room. Peeking through the crack in my door, I saw Helen sitting on the little stool, stitching the white shirt I'd thrown on the ground, using only the moonlight from the window. Her back was hunched. The lamp was off. Only the faint glow from her phone screen lit her face. I could see her press a hand to her chest every so often, her brow furrowed in pain. "Serves her right." I pulled my curtains shut, blocking out the sliver of light and the sound of her muffled coughs. By the time the sycamore shed its second wave of leaves, the smell of apple blossoms filled the alley. Coming home from school, I saw Helen on her tiptoes, picking apples from the tree in old Mr. Miller's yard next door. The sleeves of her light blue shirt billowed in the wind, making her look like a bird with a broken wing. Stealing again? I swung my backpack over my shoulder, bumping into her on purpose. She stumbled against the wall, and the apples in her wicker basket spilled out. The small, golden-red fruit rolled onto her mud-stained shoes. When she turned, I saw a band-aid on her wrist. The edges were peeling up, revealing an inflamed cut underneath. "I'm not stealing," she said, trying to hide the basket behind her back, her voice a little flustered. "Mrs. Miller said I could pick some." She said you like apple pie." "Who cares what I like?" I scoffed, grinding an apple under my shoe. The only good apple pie was the one my grandma made. She'd peel the apples in one perfect spiral and soak the slices in cinnamon and sugar for a whole day. "You know how to do that?" Her fingers twisted the wicker handle of the basket, her knuckles turning white. "I tried making it a couple of times. It didn't seem quite right." "Of course it wasn't right," I said, staring her straight in the eye. "A person like you could never learn my grandma's recipes. You're not even fit to shine her shoes." Her face faded to the same pale color as the brick wall behind her. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Suddenly, she covered her mouth and began to cough violently. The basket dropped to the ground with a clatter, spilling the rest of the apples. She was bent over, her shoulders shaking like a leaf in the wind. It took a long time for her to straighten up, and when she did, she was clutching a crumpled, pink-stained tissue in her hand. "Such an act," I muttered, turning to walk home. I heard her say quietly behind me, "I'll just pick some more apples." Her voice was as light as a feather. I didn't look back, my feet crunching loudly on the fallen leaves. That night, there was an apple pie on the table. The crust was a pale gold, dotted with cinnamon, but it smelled faintly of something raw and bitter under the sweetness. I slammed my fork down on the table. "Is this even edible?" My dad took a bite, and his brow furrowed. "It is a little bitter. Helen, did you forget to core them properly?" "I did," she said, looking down and picking at the tablecloth. Maybe I didn't let them soak long enough." "See? I told you she was useless," I said, leaning back in my chair. A strange sense of satisfaction washed over me as I watched her discomfort. "Can't even make a decent pie, but she sponges off us day after day, eating my dad's food, living in our house. How can you be so shameless?" "Leah," my dad slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. "Apologize to her right now." "For what?" I shot up from my chair, its legs scraping harshly against the floor. "Did I say anything that wasn't true? She's a freeloader. If it weren't for her, would Dad have forgotten the anniversary of Grandma's death? Last Wednesday, the anniversary. He was with her at the hospital." Helen shot to her feet, knocking her chair over. Her face was ashen, her lips trembling. "No, that's not it. That day I was." "Shut up." I pointed at the door. "You don't get to speak here." My dad's face was livid, his chest heaving. He grabbed a slice of the apple pie and hurled it onto the floor. It splattered into a sticky mess, golden apple slices mixing with bits of crust everywhere. "Get out!" he screamed, pointing at me, his hand shaking. "I don't have a daughter like you." "Fine by me." I stormed into my room to get my backpack. As I passed through the living room, I saw Helen kneeling on the floor, picking up the ruined pieces of pie. My dad stood with his back to her at the window, his shoulders as rigid as stone. Her movements were slow. She'd pick for a moment, then stop to press a hand to her chest, the sound of her coughing escaping between her fingers like air from a broken accordion. I slammed the door and was halfway down the alley when I heard a dull thud from inside, followed by my dad's frantic, terrified shouts. "Helen! Helen! What's wrong?" My heart seized. I stood frozen, my hands clutching the straps of my backpack, my feet feeling like they were encased in lead. The autumn wind carried the sweet scent of apples, mixed with the faint, distant wail of a siren, and the world started to spin. Maria ran out of the corner store, slapping her thigh. "Oh my God! What's happened now?" "Helen's been saying she felt dizzy for days," Maria cried out. "I told her to go to the doctor, but she just kept saying it was nothing." The flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance cut through the dusk. When it stopped at the mouth of the alley, I saw my dad run out, carrying Helen in his arms. Her face was chalky white, her lips bloodless, her head lolled against his shoulder, the collar of her light blue shirt dark with cold sweat. As they passed me, her eyes fluttered open. She saw me, and her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but all that came out was a faint, shallow sigh. "What are you just standing there for?" Dad yelled at me, his voice thick with tears. "Get in the ambulance." I didn't move. I watched the ambulance speed away, its lights painting dancing, grotesque shadows on the brick walls of the alley. Maria grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the store. Why are you just standing there like a fool? Go inside and wait for news. Your dad will come back for you. The clock on the shelf ticked loudly. Maria made me a cup of hot cocoa. I'm afraid Helen's been sick for a while, she said. I saw her at the pharmacy last month buying painkillers. A huge box of them. I asked her what was wrong, and she just said it was an old problem. She's probably faking, I mumbled, cupping the warm mug. My fingertips were turning red from the heat. Just wants sympathy. Maria sighed and turned to straighten a shelf. You kid. Why is your heart made of ice? If she wanted sympathy, would she have hidden her diagnosis so carefully? Last Wednesday, when she went to the hospital, it was a follow-up for her stomach cancer. Not what you think. What? I jumped to my feet. The mug fell with a clatter, hot cocoa splashing all over the floor, the sticky liquid pooling around my shoes. What did you say? Stomach cancer. Maria flinched, nearly dropping the bottle of soy sauce in her hand. You didn't know? She didn't tell you or your dad. Blood rushed to my head and then receded just as quickly, leaving me ice cold. I grabbed Maria's arm, shaking it. When did she find out? When? I think back in the summer, Maria stammered, wincing from my grip. She said she didn't want you to worry, so she kept it a secret. She said she'd tell you when you were a little older, when you'd finally accepted her. Summer. I remembered that sweltering afternoon in July when she knelt on the floor picking up the pieces of the ceramic bowl I'd smashed, the shards cutting her fingertips. I remembered how she'd looked up at me, her eyes like a lake shrouded in mist. I remembered in August when I'd spilled hot soup on the back of her hand. She'd hissed in pain but had only silently placed a tube of burn cream on my desk later. I remembered how she would secretly take pills in the kitchen, quickly hiding the bottle whenever I walked in, claiming they were just vitamins. A wave of nausea washed over me. I pushed past Maria and ran out into the alley, stumbling toward home. I stomped up the stairs, the motion sensor lights flicking on one by one. I threw open the door to our apartment. The living room was a wreck. The sticky remnants of the apple pie were still on the floor. The little stool Helen always sat on was overturned. A few sycamore leaves scattered beside it. I burst into her room. It was the first time I had ever set foot inside. It was shockingly bare. An old wooden bed, a wardrobe with peeling paint. On her desk was an open recipe book. The corner of the page for classic apple pie folded over. Next to it, in red ink, she had written, less sugar. Leah doesn't like things too sweet. The drawer of the nightstand was slightly ajar, showing the corner of a prescription box. I lunged for it and pulled it open. Pill bottles tumbled out. Pinned underneath them was a hospital diagnosis report, dated July 16th. The words late-stage stomach cancer burned my eyes like a branding iron. Deeper in the drawer was a small cloth pouch. My hands trembling, I opened it. A silver bracelet rolled out, clinking against the pill bottles. It was my grandmother's bracelet, the one I had lost last month. I had turned the house upside down looking for it, and in the end, I had pointed a finger at Helen and called her a thief, accusing her of giving it to the neighbor's little girl. She hadn't said a word, just looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. The next day, the bracelet was on my desk. She'd said she found it in the couch cushions. But in the pouch, along with the bracelet, was an IOU from our neighbor. It read, borrowed $500 from Ms. Helen for my daughter's medication. Silver bracelet as collateral, will be returned upon repayment. The date on the note was the exact day I had realized the bracelet was missing. At the very bottom of the pouch was a journal with a faded blue cloth cover. I flipped to the last page. In her neat handwriting, it said, September 3rd. The apples in the alley are ripe. I want to pick some to make a pie for Leah, but I don't think she likes me yet. September 10th. Leah and I fought again. She said I have no right to use her grandma's things. I secretly tried to make the pie just like her grandma did. I wonder if she'll even take a bite. September 15th. The pain was bad today. The doctor says I need to be admitted to the hospital. But Leah hasn't forgiven me. Maybe I'll go when she's finally willing to call me Helen. The last line was blurred, as if a tear had fallen on the ink. September 20th. The sycamore leaves are falling. Leah wore a new sweatshirt today. It looked really nice on her. The autumn wind threw a handful of leaves against the window pane. I collapsed to the floor, clutching the journal. My throat felt like it was clogged with a ball of hot cotton, and I couldn't breathe. All the bowls I had broken, the shirts I had dirted, the sweater I had thrown away, all the words I had hurled at her like knives. Suddenly they all turned into needles, stabbing me over and over in the softest part of my heart. The ambulance siren had long since faded into the night. The alley was so quiet I could hear the apples falling from the tree. I remembered how she would quietly place a glass of warm milk on my desk while I did my homework. I remembered how she would pick every single bone out of the fish before serving it to me. I remembered how, after I had shoved her to the ground, the first thing she'd asked was, "Leah, are you hurt?" She hadn't defended herself because she was too sick, too tired to find the words. She hadn't been sad because she had hidden all her pain behind that placid smile. And all this time, all this autumn, I had been pointing my sharpest thorns at her, unable to offer even a single kind word. My dad came home in the early hours of the morning. His eyes were swollen, and his stubble seemed to have turned mostly gray overnight. He saw me squatting by the door to Helen's room and handed me a cloth pouch. "She left this at the nurse's station. She said to give it to you when you'd calmed down." Inside was the dark gray sweater with the light blue thread around the collar. The stitching was uneven, clearly the work of a beginner. Wrapped inside the sweater was a note, written in her neat script. "Leah, it's getting cold. Stay warm. I'll keep practicing the apple pie for when you come home to eat it." I clutched the sweater, my thumb tracing the rough stitches. I suddenly remembered that moonlit night, seeing her on the little stool, mending my shirt. She had been that sick even then. All those coughs and pained frowns I had ignored. That was her, fighting for her life. By the time the sycamore shed its third wave of leaves, Helen's funeral was held. White lilies, damp with autumn rain, gleamed coldly under the overcast sky. I stared at her smiling eyes in the black and white photograph and suddenly remembered the last time she'd opened her eyes to look at me. So softly, so gently, as if afraid of startling something. Our neighbor, Mrs. Miller, grabbed my hand, sobbing. "You foolish child. Why didn't you understand? Helen gave me your silver bracelet to get the money for my granddaughter's medicine. Then went straight to the hospital herself for an 4-drip. She said she had to save money to buy you a new down coat for the winter." Maria from the corner store was there too, her eyes red. "Just last week she came by asking me what to get for your birthday. I suggested a scarf. She said you didn't like blue, that it had to be red." My dad handed me a small wooden box. It was as light as a feather. I held the box of ashes and walked out of the funeral home. The autumn wind swirled, carrying sycamore leaves that found their way inside my collar. A cold that went straight to the bone. As I passed the end of the alley, I saw that the apples on Mr. Miller's tree were still there, the small golden-red fruit hanging heavy on the branches, wet with rain. Helen never got to hear me call her by her name. She never got to see me eat a single bite of her apple pie. She didn't even make it to the end of autumn, and it was only after she was gone forever that I could finally see the pain hidden behind her gentle smile, the love wrapped in her silence. Back in the empty apartment, I put on the dark gray sweater. The light blue yarn at the collar was a little scratchy against my chin, but it held a warmth that made my nose burn. Outside, the sycamore leaves continued to fall, one after another, as if someone in the sky was scattering letters full of regret. I picked up my phone, scrolled to the number I had never once called, and typed out a text message. "Helen, I want to try your apple pie. Will you come home and teach me how to make it?" The moment I hit send, the tears finally broke. They mixed with the sound of the rain outside, splashing onto the cold, dark screen. The scent of apples drifted in from the alley, a sweetness so thick it was bitter, just like the words I could never say. "I'm sorry."